Have you ever heard of a bell you can feel but not hear? Or a tree that blossoms from solid stone? These aren't myths. They're real mysteries still defying explanation. Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where history's strangest discoveries are brought to light. If you love the unknown, subscribe, like, and share, so you never miss what the past still hides. The lantern that glowed only underwater. It began with the quiet roll of a tide that no one had noticed for centuries. Beneath the pale blue skin of the sea, where light falters and shadows grow soft, a shape waited in the silt. For years, maybe lifetimes, it had rested without movement, a silent survivor of a wreck no one remembered. There was no anchor chain above it now, no deck planks, no cargo crates scattered nearby. Only this single thing, lying on its side, like something abandoned in the corner of a forgotten room. A bronze lantern. At first glance, it was nothing special. The sea had claimed it long ago, wrapping its surface in a film of green, dusting it with salt. Barnacles clung to the thin handle. Shells had found a home in the hollow of its frame. The glass panels were clouded and cracked, the wick long gone. If a diver's torch passed over it, the lantern looked like what it was, an antique relic with no place to shine. But stay a moment longer, and you would see it. The glow began faintly, so faintly that even the diver's eyes might doubt it. Not a spark, not the flicker of something catching light, but a pale, low pulse, like breath through fog. It did not flash or flare. It didn't come alive when touched or moved. It waited until you were still, until the weight of the water pressed against you, and then it began to shine. The strange thing was this: the lantern only glowed when it was under the sea. Lift it into the air, onto the deck of a salvage boat, into the open sun, and its light vanished, as if it had never been there at all. The first time anyone noticed this was in the late 1980s, off the coast of a small wind-bitten peninsula in southern Australia. A pair of divers, amateurs, looking for scattered shipwreck debris, descended after spotting something metallic in a tangle of kelp. They found the lantern wedged in a shallow depression in the sand, just beside the faint outline of something long buried. They assumed it was part of a larger wreck and planned to surface with it. One of them, Paul, slid it into the crook of his arm. The other, Ellie, swore she saw it give off a pale light for a moment. She tapped her mask, assuming she was seeing a trick of sunlight cutting through the water. Paul didn't notice anything until they were halfway up to the boat. As the surface drew near, the faint light faded, completely gone by the time they broke into the air. Back on the boat, it looked ordinary. No glow. Just a wet, barnacle-crusted lantern with a handle bent like an old elbow. They laughed it off, said the light had probably been sunlight refracted in the water. They took it home, cleaned it carefully, and placed it on a shelf. Weeks passed. It was only when Paul took it back down into the water, planning to photograph it, that the glow returned. This time, there was no sunlight overhead, no beams cutting down. The day was overcast, the sea grey, and still, the lantern pulsed with that dim, steady light. He swam closer. It seemed to come not from the glass, but from somewhere inside the metal, as though the bronze itself carried it. The glow was never strong enough to illuminate the surroundings, but it was constant, unyielding, like a memory refusing to fade. Word spread slowly, because Paul and Ellie didn't tell many people. They worried about the lantern being taken, or mocked, or locked away in some museum drawer. Yet curiosity is difficult to contain. Over the years, a handful of others saw it, each under the same conditions, submerged, silent, undisturbed. Some claimed they could hear something faint when it glowed, not a hum, not the shifting of water, but a sound like distant footsteps on wooden boards. Others said the glow seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeat. Scientists eventually examined it. They suggested marine bioluminescent residue, or a chemical reaction between the metal and salt water. Tests were run in tanks, in aquariums, even in simulated deep-sea pressure chambers. The glow never appeared in controlled environments, only in the open sea, and never above the surface. What unsettled those who studied it most was not the light itself, but the faint traces of something embedded in the bronze. Microscopic examination showed hairline grooves and marks that weren't from age or corrosion. They looked intentional, too deliberate to be random, yet too irregular to form a clear symbol. Some said they resembled an unfamiliar script, almost worn away. Others thought they were the impressions of something once pressed against the lantern when it was still soft, before it cooled into metal. No one could agree. Theories began to multiply. Some said the lantern came from a long-lost colonial ship, its strange glow the result of a maritime accident or chemical spill. Others thought it was older, perhaps a piece traded from far-off lands long before Europeans charted these coasts. A few, always in hushed tones, suggested something else, that the glow was not a product of the sea, but a condition of the lantern's purpose, that it was never meant to shine in air at all. When older sailors heard about it, a few claimed they had known of such things. One spoke of a drowned light his grandfather had mentioned, objects that glowed only in the company of the dead, or in places where no living fire could burn. These stories never matched exactly, but they shared the same unease, the belief that certain lights were not meant to guide the living, but to find something else in the dark. No one has traced the wreck where it was found. The sea floor there shifts constantly, rearranged by currents and storms. Sand buries and exhumes things without warning. The shape that lay beside it on the first dive has not been seen since. Paul and Ellie stopped diving that spot years ago, partly out of frustration, partly because of a night when Paul dreamed of the lantern. In the dream, it was not lying on the sea floor but hanging, swaying in a current that felt like wind. Around it were shadows, tall, slow-moving shapes he could not focus on. The light pulsed, dim but steady, and each time it did, the shadows drew closer. When he woke, he could still feel the heaviness of the water in his chest. He swore he could taste salt. Years have passed, but the lantern remains in their possession, kept in a glass case. They take it out only rarely now, and never for more than a single dive. Always the same routine: descend, wait, watch the glow emerge, like something waking up. Then, slowly bring it back before the surface can strip it of light. And each time, they notice something small, a change so slight they can't prove it, only sense it. A faint deepening of the marks on its surface, a shift in the rhythm of the glow. Once, Ellie thought she saw the light flicker in a pattern, like someone walking away and looking back at the same time. No one can say how long it will keep glowing, no one can say why it refuses the air, but those who have seen it all agree on one thing: the light feels older than the sea itself, as if it remembers a place where the waves never broke, where no sky waited above. Only depth upon depth, and the slow approach of something you could not see until it was right beside you. And perhaps that is why the lantern waits at the bottom of the world, patient, unblinking, glowing not to be found, but to remind whatever it once belonged to that it is still here. The bridge that was built for no shore. It begins beneath a sky that seems to have forgotten how to move. The air is pale with dust, the horizon blurred by the trembling heat. The wind carries no scent of water, no whisper of green. For miles in every direction, the ground is a dull, cracked earth, bleached nearly white by centuries of sun. And then, without warning, it appears, rising from the dead land is a curve of stone, pale, weather-worn, but impossibly precise. From one angle, it looks like an arch, caught mid-stride. From another, it is an open mouth, yawning toward nothing. Walk closer, and the shape resolves into something stranger still. Not one arch, but a chain of them, rib after rib of dressed stone, marching in a perfect, unbroken line across the sand. It is a bridge, or what can only be called a bridge. But here, there is no river, no canyon, no drop for it to span. It begins on flat earth, lifts gently into the air, and ends on the same flat earth, stretching toward a point where the desert simply swallows it whole. The locals call it Pul Gumra, the bridge of deception. To some it is cursed, to others it is the last trace of a road built for gods, a causeway that once touched the very edge of the sea. But the sea has been gone for longer than memory, and no one can say who built it, or why. When the first archaeologists reached this place in the late 19th century, they believed they were looking at the remains of an ancient aqueduct, the kind the Romans might have built to carry water to a thirsty city. But this was no Roman work, and no aqueduct. The stones are older, their method of joinery alien to classical hands. Where the Romans used mortar, this bridge is dry fit, each block shaped so precisely that even after untold centuries, not a sliver of paper could slide between them. Even stranger is the taper. At first glance, each arch seems identical, yet if you walk the line, from the first to the last, the spacing narrows not upward toward the crown, but downward toward the ground. The base steps grow smaller the further you go, as if the bridge were being built in reverse, each arch preparing to carry less and less weight until, finally, there is nothing left to carry at all. No one builds a bridge like that. In the early 1920s, a German expedition camped here for 3 weeks, measuring, sketching and probing the sand. They found shards of pottery, sun-baked to the color of ash. They found a few corroded nails, square cut and eaten nearly through with rust. But they found no road leading to the bridge, no foundation of any settlement nearby. and no trace of whatever purpose it might have served. One of the team, a quiet man named Bauer, swore in his journal that they had heard water in the night. Not the dry rush of desert wind, but the slow, certain lap of waves against stone. No one else heard it, and he was teased for the rest of the expedition. In the decades that followed, the site slipped back into obscurity. It was too remote to draw tourists, too puzzling for quick conclusions, but there were always stories. Shepard said that in the season before the rains, such as they were, the bridge glowed faintly under moonlight, each arch picked out as if from within. Traders claimed that crossing the bridge in complete darkness brought dreams of another place entirely, a lush valley, a black river, a city with no name. Those who dreamed it never agreed on the details, but all described the same sound, a slow tolling, like a bell rung underwater. By the 1970s, satellite imagery became the new tool for archaeology, and the bridge was briefly rediscovered in aerial photographs. Analysts noted something the ground teams had missed. Faint, almost invisible lines in the desert running parallel to the structure, like the ghost of an ancient causeway. The lines extended for nearly 2 kilometers in either direction before fading into nothing. They could have been natural, wind patterns in the sand, old irrigation trenches, but they were straight, and in the desert, nothing straight stays by accident. When modern excavations began in the early 2000s, they brought more questions than answers. Ground-penetrating radar revealed that the bridge's footings were far deeper than anyone expected. As if the builders had anchored it not to soil, but to something below the soil, a hidden bedrock, or perhaps an older structure entirely. The stone itself came from a quarry almost 50 kilometers away, a type of limestone that, when freshly cut, gleams almost white. Even now, under centuries of weathering, the inner faces of the arches are smoother than any desert stone has a right to be. The strangest discovery came from a team of materials scientists who analyzed the wear patterns on the lower steps. Instead of being abraded evenly, they were worn in a strange, almost polished way, the kind that comes from repeated contact with something soft, not hard, cloth, perhaps, or skin. It was as though countless bare feet had crossed here, year after year, wearing the stone down not with force, but with time. There is a moment, if you walk the bridge alone, when the desert seems to draw away from you. The air becomes still, almost heavy. The light flattens, shadows shrinking, as if the sun has moved closer to the earth. From the midpoint, the land in either direction appears subtly different. The sand to the north, a shade darker, the air to the south, faintly shimmering. Some have likened it to the feeling of standing at a border between two countries. Others say it is like standing between two times. An old Bedouin tale claims the bridge was built by a people who came from the east, following a great flood. They built it not to cross a river, but to keep something from crossing back, a barrier, not a road. In the oldest version of the story, the bridge was once guarded by a bronze gate that stood between the second and third arches. No one remembers what became of the gate, only that when it fell, the land on the far side turned to dust. On certain nights, researchers say, you can still hear something here, not water, not wind, a low vibration that trembles through the stone if you press your ear to it, lasting only a few seconds before it's gone. Sensitive instruments have recorded it, a tone somewhere between 42 and 46 Hz, well below the range of most human hearing, but strong enough to register as a faint hum. It happens irregularly, with no clear cause. The official reports list the bridge as an isolated relic of an unknown civilization, dated roughly between 800 BCE and 200 CE, though the margin of error is enormous. There is no inscription, no carving, no tool mark to tell its story, only the stones, the narrowing steps, and the silence of the desert. If you stand there long enough, as the sun sinks and the heat begins to drain from the air, you might notice something else. The ground beyond the final arch seems subtly depressed, as if something vast and heavy once lay there, and in the long shadows of sunset, those depressions align perfectly with the arches themselves, as though the bridge were meant to rest not over emptiness, but over something unseen, now long buried. No one has dug there, not yet. The desert keeps its own counsel, and the bridge remains, perfect and useless, waiting for a shore that may never come again. The feather that never decayed. It began, as so many discoveries do, in the quiet heat, before the day's work truly begins. A valley floor, walled in by cliffs, the color of baked clay, stretched out before the excavation team. The place had no name on modern maps, only a thin marker, in the hand of a long-dead cartographer, on an 18th century parchment, tucked away in a university library. The map had led them here to a ridge that appeared unremarkable from afar, yet gave the faint impression of being shaped by someone's hand, rather than by wind or water. The expedition's leader, Dr. Anaya Soler, had been hunting for this ridge for nearly 12 years, not for gold or for idols, but for a rumor recorded in a fading missionary's journal from the early 1600s. The journal spoke of a room without light, where the breath of the dead still waits, and where a plume lies upon the stone like a gift to the sky. Most historians dismissed it as allegory, colonial dramatization, meant to impress readers back in Europe. But Anaya wasn't so sure. The first week's digging was slow. The earth here was dense, layered with centuries of dust blown from the highlands. Stones bore the weathered scars of flash floods, but beneath them, patterns began to emerge. Dressed blocks of sandstone, fitted together with a precision that seemed almost wasteful in a place no one had lived for hundreds of years. On the 12th day, one of the workers' picks rang out, not against rock, but against the hollow sound of something beneath. By the next evening, they had cleared enough to reveal what appeared to be the top of a sealed passageway, sloping down into the ridge. The air that drifted up from the narrow crack was stale but dry, carrying a scent that reminded Anaya of faded parchment and dusted cedar. No signs of collapse, no water damage. Whatever was below had been sealed for a very long time. They descended the next morning. The passage walls were cut with a fineness that suggested skilled masons, lines so straight they seemed drawn with a ruler. Here and there, faint carvings emerged from the stone, feathers, stylized to the point of abstraction, repeating every few meters like a pattern meant to guide the way. At the end of the passage, they found a chamber. It was small, no more than 4 meters across, but the ceiling arched gracefully overhead, inlaid with thin sheets of hammered metal, so tarnished they reflected no light. And in the center of the chamber, resting upon a block of polished obsidian, lay the object that would change everything. It was a single feather, long curved slightly at the tip, its vein intact, its barbs smooth and soft. Not the brittle relic one might expect after centuries underground, but a feather so perfectly preserved it might have fallen from the wing of a bird moments ago. No dust lay upon it, no insect had touched it. Anaya froze. There were no signs of artificial preservation, no resin, no mineralization. The colors, too, were strange, deep black along the shaft, fading into a gradient of iridescent green that shimmered faintly even in the weak lamplight. She reached out, but hesitated. The air around the feather felt subtly cooler than the rest of the chamber, as if whatever protected it resisted the warmth of living hands. They photographed it from every angle before moving it. When they finally dared to lift it, using a tray lined with sterile cloth, the sensation was uncanny. It was lighter than it should have been, almost without weight at all. And yet it was there, solid between their tools, bending ever so slightly under its own length. Back at the field tent, the team examined it under magnification. No fraying, no splitting of the quill. Under high light, tiny bead-like structures on the barbules caught and scattered the glow in a way no one could explain. The samples taken from its surface yielded no trace of decay, no fungal spores, no bacterial residue. It was as if the feather existed outside the processes that governed the rest of the organic world. Word spread quickly through the camp. By the 3rd day, workers were inventing theories. Some said it belonged to a bird now extinct, one revered by an ancient culture for whom feathers were sacred currency. Others whispered that it had been part of a ceremonial headdress worn only by the highest priest, an object imbued with rites long since forgotten. A few murmured older stories, handed down quietly in the region, that certain birds could pass between the world of the living and the dead, leaving a single plume as proof they had been here. When the team returned to the chamber to search for more, they found it unchanged. No other artifacts lay upon the obsidian block, no inscriptions save for the repeating feather motifs along the walls. Yet Anaya noticed something strange. When they re-entered, the air in the chamber was markedly warmer than before. And where the feather had been, the stone was faintly darker, almost damp, though no water was present. The feather's journey from the desert ridge to the laboratory was delicate. Packed in a nitrogen-filled case, to prevent environmental shock, it was escorted under guard. Scientists across multiple disciplines examined it. Under electron microscopy, its microstructure appeared normal. Keratin arranged just as in any feather, but without the microscopic erosion typical of age. Radiocarbon dating failed repeatedly, each test returning inconsistent or impossible results. Chemical analysis revealed nothing foreign. No preservatives, no unusual isotopes. DNA sequencing suggested it came from a bird of the Crax genus, related to modern curassows found in South America. Yet no known species matched the precise structure, and none of those species could have survived in the dry plateau where it was found. Theories multiplied. Some proposed it had been brought here via ancient trade routes from the rainforest thousands of kilometers away. Others argued it was ceremonial, crafted from unknown materials to mimic a real feather. But the most unsettling theory came from an ethnobiologist who noticed something subtle. The iridescent green along the vein did not reflect light. It seemed to emit it, not brightly, not enough to illuminate, but with a faint, persistent shimmer visible even in total darkness. When the feather was placed in a light-proof chamber, it remained visible to the cameras. The glow, measured in nanolumens, did not fade over time. It didn't respond to changes in temperature, humidity, or magnetic field. In fact, it seemed wholly unaffected by environmental variables, an impossible stability. Some began to suggest it was not simply preserved, but locked in a state of unending present, untouched by the passage of time. In local oral histories, the expedition found a fragment of a song that mentioned the gift that sleeps until the sky is called down. The words were vague, but elders insisted it referred to a feather, one that would not decay until the day it was needed to awaken a sleeping god. Whether this was symbolic or literal was unclear. What was clear was this: when the feather was returned briefly to the obsidian block during a follow-up visit to the site, a strange thing happened. The air temperature in the chamber dropped by nearly 5 degrees in less than a minute, and the feather's green hue deepened, as though it had been reunited with its original environment. When it was removed again, the color slowly returned to normal. To this day, the feather remains in a sealed case in a climate-controlled vault. Researchers still debate its origin, its age, its meaning. It has not lost a single barbule. The shimmer along its edge still glows faintly in the dark, and those who have stood close to it, close enough to see the almost imperceptible tremor along its vein, as though moved by a wind that no one else can feel, often speak later of the sensation that it is waiting, not decaying, not sleeping, but waiting, for what no one can say. The steps that sank into the sea. The first time you hear about the steps, they sound like a trick of the tide, a coastal quirk, the kind you might see on an island where wind and salt water have been at work for millennia. But in Yonaguni, at the western edge of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, where the Pacific stretches endlessly toward Taiwan, the story is spoken with a kind of steady certainty. They say there's a staircase carved into the rock, a stairway that vanishes into the sea, not just with the tide, but into depths that no seasonal swell can explain. Yonaguni is a quiet island, small enough to cross in a short drive, yet layered with a sense of age that seems older than the stones that make up its cliffs. On calm days, the waters are impossibly clear, the turquoise brightening to a deep sapphire where the reef drops away. But it is when the ocean stills entirely that certain fishermen will point toward a section of the coast, not the tourist beaches or the harbor, but a more rugged place, where black rock meets the constant rush of surf, and say that just below the old steps wait. Divers have known this place for decades now. Some call it the Yonaguni Monument. Others dismiss it as nothing more than a natural formation, sandstone carved by currents and time into geometric forms that merely resemble architecture. But the steps are different, too uniform, too deliberate. Each rise and tread is measured in almost perfect proportion, as though a mason's chisel and not an ocean's patience had shaped them. And they lead, not up toward a shrine or down toward a harbor, but into the blue, descending far past where sunlight weakens. The first documented encounter was in the late 1980s, when a local diver, Kiichiro Arateki, went exploring beyond familiar reefs. He had expected coral, fish, perhaps the silhouette of a hammerhead. Yonaguni is famous for its seasonal schools of them. Instead, he found what seemed to be a massive platform beneath the waves, terraces cut in sharp right angles, walls that rose like fortress sides, and at one edge, a staircase. It began in the shallows, just deep enough that a snorkeler could see its upper steps, and then it sank, deeper and deeper, until the sea took it entirely. Word spread quickly among Japan's diving community. Underwater photographers arrived, curious to capture the strange symmetry. Some swore they saw tool marks on the stone. Others pointed to the way certain ledges aligned with each other, as though part of a much larger complex, a drowned acropolis. But skeptics countered with geology. The sandstone in Yonaguni fractures along clean lines, creating natural terraces and steps when eroded. And yet, erosion rarely works with such consistency. When you first approach the site from the surface, it appears unassuming. The boat rocks gently over calm water, the sun overhead scattering bright ripples across the blue. Then you drop beneath the surface, and everything shifts. The light bends into a cooler spectrum, the noise of the world above becomes a muffled hum, and the monument emerges from the haze, massive, immovable, a dark shape etched against the lighter sand below. The staircase begins near the top of one wall, wide enough for 3 or 4 people to walk abreast if it were on land. The stone is smooth underhand, each step between half a meter and a full meter in height, taller than most modern stairs, yet proportionate in a way that suggests intention. Schools of fish drift across the treads, flashing silver in the light. Algae clings to the edges, waving softly in the current. Following the steps downward is both exhilarating and unsettling. With each meter of descent, the water grows cooler, the pressure building in your ears. Sunlight dims to a pale green, then to a dim twilight. And yet the steps remain, continuing at a steady angle, refusing to break or twist into chaos as natural formations often do. There is a sense, whether real or imagined, that they are leading you somewhere, that they are not just a relic, but a path. Some divers claim the staircase ends at a flat, open platform, a kind of plaza. From there, other structures rise, what looks like a broad stage, a massive stone block, and a set of parallel walls that create a narrow corridor. Others say the steps simply dissolve into a slope of stone, as though the rest lies buried in sediment. The currents here are strong, and visibility can shift quickly, so no two accounts are exactly the same. Local legend adds another layer to the mystery. The Ryukyu Islands have long told stories of cities swallowed by the sea. In Okinawan folklore, there are tales of a lost land called Narai Kanai, a paradise beneath the waves, the origin of life and culture. Some elders on Yonaguni speak of an ancient flood, a time when the sea rose and claimed villages whole. In their telling, the steps could have led to a sacred site, perhaps a temple where offerings were made to the gods of the ocean. Archaeologists remain cautious. There is no definitive evidence, no artifacts, no carvings with recognizable script to confirm that the monument is man-made. Yet, if it were, the last time this area was above sea level would have been during the last ice age, more than 10,000 years ago, when sea levels were over 100 meters lower. That would make the steps, if human in origin, older than any known Japanese stone structure, older than the pyramids. Still, the sea guards its secrets well. In storm season, powerful swells crash over the site, making it nearly impossible to reach. Even in calm weather, the currents around Yonaguni can sweep divers away from the monument in moments. And then there is the eerie quality of the place itself, the stillness between surges, the way shadows gather at the edges of vision, the sense that the structure is watching you as much as you are studying it. Those who have descended the steps often speak of an odd feeling, not fear exactly, but a heavy awareness. It is as if you are not simply visiting a ruin, but intruding on something that continues to exist in its own time, unaffected by yours. The fish move around you without alarm, the light drifts in shifting patterns across the stone, and you realize that whatever purpose this place once held, it has long since been surrendered to the sea. When you surface again, the island feels different. Yonaguni's cliffs, jagged and weathered, seem to mirror the shapes below the waterline. The wind carries the scent of salt and kelp. Somewhere in the distance, waves break against the same rocks that may have once overlooked the staircase before it slipped beneath the waves. You can leave Yonaguni and carry the memory of the steps with you, replaying their quiet geometry in your mind, wondering whether they were the work of nature or the last visible trace of a civilization forgotten by history. But the truth, whatever it may be, will remain anchored there, just beyond the shore, in the shifting blue. The sea will keep it, as it has for millennia, and the steps will continue to descend into a silence that no tide has ever broken. The bell that rang without sound. I first heard of the bell from an old archivist in Kyoto, a man whose voice was as soft as the paper he worked with. We had been talking about the usual things, maps, temple registries, the lives of the artisans whose names had been lost centuries ago, when he leaned back, glanced over his shoulder, as though someone might be listening, and said, "There is a bell you cannot hear." I thought at first he meant a metaphor, some poetic turn of phrase, the way monks sometimes speak of enlightenment as a sound beyond sound. But he reached into a drawer and withdrew a folder, its papers yellowed and curling at the edges. The top sheet bore a photograph, sepia and faintly blurred, of a tall, narrow bronze object, covered in fine geometric etchings. The shape was unmistakable, a dotoku, the ceremonial bells of Japan's Yayoi period, cast between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. But the archivist's finger tapped a line in the caption. Resonates without audible tone. I knew dotoku well enough. They were not made for ringing out over fields or calling monks to prayer. Their walls were too thin, their sound too soft. Most were found buried on hillsides, sometimes in groups, as though hidden away from the world. Theories swirled: agricultural talismans, harvest calendars, status symbols. But this one was different. According to the report beneath the photograph, it could be struck, and its surface would vibrate visibly, yet no human ear had ever caught a note. I left Kyoto the next morning. The bell was said to be kept in a small coastal town in Shikoku, in a museum whose name I will not record here, not out of secrecy for secrecy's sake, but because the curator herself asked me to withhold it. It was early summer when I arrived, the air heavy with the scent of the sea. The museum was a low, modern structure of pale stone, with wide glass panels looking out over the harbor. Inside, light pooled in quiet corners, and the hush was broken only by the sound of my own footsteps on the polished floor. The curator was waiting for me by the main display hall, a small woman in her 60s, dressed in linen and wearing thin spectacles. She didn't ask my name, only nodded once and said, "You've come for the Dotaku." She led me to a side room where the lighting was softer, and there it stood, the bell itself. It was taller than I expected, almost a meter high, and so slender it seemed fragile enough to topple at a breath. Its bronze surface was a deep greenish brown, the patina of centuries, yet the geometric bands of decoration were crisp and unblurred, parallel lines, lozenges and spirals so fine they seemed drawn with a needle. I walked around it slowly. There were no cracks, no repairs. The handle, a double arch rising from the top, was intact. Near the base, I saw faint marks, tiny pitting that looked almost like stippling, but in a pattern that didn't match corrosion. I asked about them, and the curator's eyes flickered. "Come," she said, and gestured toward a small mallet on a nearby table. It was wrapped in leather, clearly made to avoid damage to the bronze. She nodded for me to lift it. I tapped the bell once, lightly. The surface shimmered, not like water, but like heat in the air. My hand felt it instantly, a fine, quick vibration that traveled up the mallet into my wrist, my elbow, my shoulder. I tapped again, harder, and the vibration deepened, a slow pulsing wave that seemed to sink through my bones. But there was no sound, not muffled, not faint, nothing. The silence was absolute, almost oppressive. I stepped back, and the sensation ebbed from my arm like a tide pulling away from shore. The curator told me the bell had been found after a typhoon had torn into the coastline decades ago. A section of cliff collapsed, exposing a small cave sealed by earth and stone. Inside, along with the Dotaku, were fragments of pottery, lacquered wooden objects reduced to fragile husks, and the skeletal remains of a deer, its antlers still intact. The cave floor had been dry despite its proximity to the sea, suggesting deliberate sealing. Experts had examined the bell, of course. Metallurgists declared it genuine, cast from bronze with a high tin content, consistent with other Dotaku of the late Yayoi period. Yet the way it resonated without producing an audible tone defied their instruments. Microphones picked up nothing but the faintest hiss of background air. Laser vibrometry confirmed that it was vibrating, in frequencies well within the range of human hearing. And yet, silence. I asked if anyone had theories. The curator hesitated before answering. Some say it was meant for the gods, that its note exists, but not for us. Others believe it's a warning device, meant to be felt through the ground. And then, there are those who say it is damaged, though I do not see how. I stayed in that room for over an hour, tapping the bell at different points, lightly, firmly, experimentally. Always the same sensation, the pulse through the hand, the absence in the ear. I began to wonder if the vibration was not merely physical. There was something in it that felt communicative, as though a message were being sent, but not in any language I knew. The museum closed at 5. The curator locked the room and walked me out. But before we parted, she said, "If you wish to understand it, you must see where it slept." The next morning, a local fisherman ferried me along the jagged shoreline to the site of the cave. The cliff face here was raw and scarred, its pale rock streaked with darker seams. Waves struck the base in rhythmic bursts, throwing spray that clung to my clothes. The entrance to the cave was no more than a shadowed hollow now, the upper part collapsed further since the excavation. I crouched in the shallows, peering inside. The stone was lined with a thin layer of something like soot, though when I touched it, it smeared faintly green, copper salts perhaps. Above me, carved into the rock just beyond the reach of the waves, were 3 narrow lines running parallel, not tool marks, not erosion, deliberate. The fisherman told me the elders believed the bell had been placed here to anchor the sea, in their telling long before the town existed. Storms came every season, swallowing fields and homes. One year, strangers came by boat, carrying the bronze bell. They struck it once, and the sea stilled. They left it in the cave, sealed the entrance, and told the people that as long as it remained untouched, the shore would be safe. It made for a good story, but it didn't explain why the bell sang in silence. That night, I returned to the museum for a final visit. The curator allowed me into the locked room alone. I stood before the bell, feeling the weight of centuries press in from all sides. This time, I didn't strike it with the mallet. I placed both hands gently against the bronze and closed my eyes. The vibration came instantly, not from a strike, but from the contact itself, as if the bell were humming continuously, too softly for the ear, but never ceasing. It was slow, steady, and strangely familiar, like the rhythm of a heartbeat, not mine, not human. I don't remember leaving the museum, only waking in my inn-room before dawn, the soundless pulse still echoing in my bones. I never learned the truth of the bell, perhaps no one will. It remains in that quiet coastal town, sealed behind glass, vibrating silently to anyone who dares to touch it. The curator still writes to me now and then, brief notes about the changing tides, the absence of storms. Once she sent a single line, it has not stopped, and sometimes, in the deep hours of night, I wonder if I can still feel it, very faintly thrumming through the world. The map with rivers that never existed. I first saw the map on a winter morning, in the half-lit quiet of an archive room that smelled faintly of cedar and dust. It lay under glass, flattened against a pale backing sheet, its colors dimmed but still stubbornly vivid, despite the centuries, deep ochres, faded blues, and the patient black lines of ink that had once been sharper than a blade. The archivist did not speak as I leaned in, as though the act of looking was already a kind of trespass. I knew what I was supposed to see, the coastlines, the spidery compass roses, the curling Latin letters like knots in a sailor's rope, but my eyes went instead to the interior, to the places most maps of its time had left blank. There, where I expected the beige of parchment and nothing more, were rivers, wide, winding, shaded, with such care that I could almost see their imagined currents. And yet, the rivers ran through deserts, not just any deserts, but regions I had crossed myself. Landscapes where the wind whips grit into your teeth, and the sun scrapes away the moisture from your skin. Places where a man could walk for 3 days without finding so much as a brackish puddle. On this map, however, they were broad waterways, flanked by green. I traced one with my finger, from the mouth of a bay I knew did not exist, inland through what should have been endless dunes. It split, like veins in a leaf, and vanished somewhere near the place we now call the Empty Quarter. Another curled through the heart of the Sahara, passing towns whose names I did not recognize, sketched with tiny towers and domes. The archivist finally spoke, his voice low. "You've noticed the rivers." I nodded. "They've always been there," he said, "and they've never been there." When I looked up, he had already turned away, busying himself with another cabinet, as though the matter was closed. But it wasn't closed for me. I had heard of anomalies in early maps before, coastlines drawn with surprising accuracy centuries before proper surveys, islands that later vanished, fragments of continents that should not have been known to the mapmakers who drew them. This one, though, was different. These were not coastlines a ship might have stumbled upon in fog, or islands glimpsed from the deck before being lost in storms. These were rivers, things that do not appear by chance, things that leave scars in the earth, even when they dry up. If they had existed, they could be found. I asked for permission to photograph the map, to study it more closely, and after a pause the archivist agreed, on the condition that I name neither the collection nor the donor. It was, he told me, only a fragment of a larger chart, drawn in the early 1500s by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis. Half the map was missing, but what remained had been enough to puzzle historians for decades. Most knew it, for its startling depiction of South America's coastline. Fewer cared about the rivers inland, but for me they became the only thing worth seeing. That night, in a rented room above a street that smelled of frying bread, I compared the photograph to satellite images of the regions in question. The coastlines did not align perfectly, but the rivers, impossibly, sometimes did. In the Sahara, a thin, pale scar cut across the sand, visible only from far above, tracing the exact curve of one of the drawn rivers. It could have been an ancient wadi, long since dry. It could have been coincidence, but my chest tightened as I thought of the care with which it had been inked, as though the cartographer had known its shape intimately. 2 weeks later, I was in the air. The first leg of the journey took me south, over seas that looked flat from the window but were restless below, toward the North African coast. I carried with me a rolled reproduction of the map, a GPS unit, and a leather-bound notebook that I had once used for ship logs. On my second day inland, I reached the edge of what had been, in the mapmaker's vision, a river mouth. In reality, it was a shallow bay choked with reeds, with salt crusting its edges. A fisherman watched me from a distance as I stood knee-deep in the water, looking for a channel that did not exist. When I asked him, through a translator, if the water had ever been deeper, he laughed and pointed inland. Once, he said, before even my grandfather's grandfather, the water came from the mountains. He shrugged. Now the mountains are dry. I moved inland, following the line from the map. The terrain rose, flattened, then rippled into low dunes. Every so often, the sand would give way to patches of hard-packed clay, fractured like old pottery. In one such patch, I found something that did not belong, a fragment of worked stone, its surface carved with parallel grooves. A broken quernstone, perhaps, or part of a threshold. Nearby, a scatter of shells crumbled under my boots, not the kind you find in the modern sea, but bleached, brittle, ancient. By the fourth day, the heat was a living thing, pressing against my back, breathing in my ears. The land here was silent, except for the hiss of sand on sand. Yet at night, lying on my back under a sky so thick with stars it seemed to sag under their weight, I imagined the sound of water, a slow, deliberate current sliding past reeds. It was easy, in the cool hours before dawn, to believe the map was right. When I reached the point where the river on the map forked, I found the faint trace of an old channel, a depression winding between two low ridges. My guide, an older man with a face lined like dried river mud, crouched beside it. People still find things here after the rains, he told me. Old things, pots, tools. We dug with our hands and came up with a shard of pottery no larger than my thumb. Its glaze was the pale green of oxidized copper, and the edge was smooth where it had broken long ago. I wrapped it in cloth and put it in my bag. Over the next weeks, I followed the map's impossible rivers through 3 countries, across landscapes that seemed determined to erase every trace of their past selves. In some places, I found nothing but stone and sand. In others, I found what might have been river terraces, eroded beyond recognition. Once in a dried-out basin, I found the remains of a fish vertebra, too large for any species living nearby now. It was not proof, but it was enough to make the lines on the map feel less like invention. Still, questions gnawed at me. If these rivers had once flowed, when had they dried? Who had charted them so precisely, and why had their memory persisted into the age of Piri Reis? The further I traced them, the less certain I became of the answers. My last journey took me far from the desert, to a different river entirely, one that had also been inked on the map, flowing through what was now an empty salt flat in Central Asia. The locals called it the Ghost River. They said that in spring, after rare rains, the water would rise for a few days, filling the ancient bed before sinking back into the earth. Standing there, ankle deep in cracked mud, I could imagine a time when it had never vanished. Months later, back in the archive, I unrolled the reproduction beside the original. The rivers were still there, defying the deserts, refusing to be erased by time or truth. I realized then that the map's mystery might never be solved, that it might remain forever in the space between history and imagination. But I also knew that somewhere beneath the sands and the salt, the earth remembered, and that was enough to keep me searching. The boat carved for a lake that wasn't there. I first heard about the boat from a man whose name I never caught. It was late evening in a small roadside tea shop, the kind with dented metal kettles and the faint smell of wood smoke in the air. He was a wiry figure, probably in his 70s, with hands like driftwood, gnarled but oddly graceful. We had been talking about nothing in particular, the weather, the road, the strange tendency of the desert wind to change direction without warning. Then, without shifting his gaze from the chipped glass in his hand, he said, "They dug up a boat out there last year, miles from water. Miles. At first I thought I'd misheard. A boat? Here, we were sitting in a town that hadn't seen a proper river in living memory, a place where rainfall was an event worth recording in family histories." But the man spoke with a steady certainty, the way old people do when they know something cannot be doubted. He told me the archaeologists had come in from the city, following a tip from a shepherd who had stumbled upon wood protruding from a shallow mound. The shepherd had assumed it was part of an old cart or perhaps the remains of a shelter long since buried by shifting sand. But when they cleared the surface away, it wasn't a cart. It was curved, deliberately shaped, smoothed by tools, and the grain of the wood was unlike anything growing in the region today. By the time the team had unearthed the full form, it was unmistakable. A boat? The old man paused then, watching my reaction. I must have looked skeptical, because he smiled faintly. Go see for yourself, he said. He scribbled a name on the corner of a paper napkin, along with a set of rough directions that seemed to involve more landmarks than actual road names. Then he left, moving as quietly as he'd arrived. It took me 3 days to reach the site. The road wound through sun-baked hills, their surfaces cracked like old pottery, and into a broad, flat basin that felt like the bottom of a drained sea. The air shimmered in the heat, blurring the horizon so that the land seemed to float above itself. There were no signs, no fences, only a few low tents clustered near a shallow excavation. A young woman in a wide-brimmed hat emerged from one of the tents as I approached. Her skin was darkened by the sun, her hair tied back in a long braid that trailed down her spine. When I mentioned the old man from the tea shop, she gave a slow, knowing nod. "You'd better see it before the sand comes in again," she said, and led me down into the pit. The boat lay tilted on its side, as if it had once been resting on a shore and had simply frozen in time. Its hull was carved from a single massive tree trunk, hollowed with extraordinary precision. The wood had darkened over centuries, but the craftsmanship was still evident, the gentle sweep of the prow, the way the interior ribs had been reinforced with fitted dowels rather than nails. No modern tool marks marred the surface. This was handwork, patient and deliberate. But what unsettled me most was not the boat itself, it was the place where it rested. There was no ancient shoreline, no telltale sediment of a vanished lake. The soil beneath it was coarse and dry, made of wind-blown sand that seemed to have been there for ages. If there had ever been water here, it had vanished so completely that even the memory of it had been erased from the land. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Lala Farzad, the site's lead archaeologist. She explained that the wood had been dated to nearly 2,000 years ago, and its origin was even stranger. It came from a species of cedar found hundreds of kilometers away, far to the north. Transporting a whole trunk of that size through desert terrain would have been an extraordinary undertaking, even with modern equipment. Yet here it was, expertly shaped into a boat and buried far from any navigable water. I asked her if perhaps the climate had been different then. She conceded that parts of the region had once been wetter, with seasonal rivers and floodplains, but this specific location had shown no geological evidence of a lake large enough to justify a vessel of this size. Even if there had been water here, she said quietly, why would you drag a boat to it from so far away? At night I camped near the excavation. The desert was not silent, it sighed and whispered, the wind carrying grains of sand that rattled against my tent like soft rain. I thought about the boat lying only a few meters away, cradled in earth that had never known the cool lap of waves. The more I considered it, the more the image unsettled me. In the days that followed, I assisted the team in carefully documenting the find. We brushed away fine layers of sand, revealing small details that deepened the mystery. Faint carvings along the gunwale, worn smooth but still visible under the right light. They were not decorative swirls or random scratches. They were deliberate marks, perhaps symbols or an early script. Dr. Farzad photographed them extensively, but said she had yet to identify their origin. One afternoon, as the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the pit, I noticed something else. Near the base of the hull, half buried in compacted sand, was a narrow wooden paddle. It was shorter than I expected, carved from a different kind of wood, and its blade had a curious asymmetry, as if meant to steer more than propel. When I pointed it out, the others gathered silently. It was the first associated artifact we had found, and it only made the questions multiply. Who had carved this vessel? Why had they brought it here? And most haunting of all, had it ever touched water? That night, over a dim lantern glow, one of the graduate students told me a local story passed down among nomadic tribes. It spoke of a mirror lake that appeared only under certain moons, a body of water that was more a reflection than a reality. Some claimed it could be walked upon, others that it swallowed whole those who tried to cross. The boat, he suggested half-jokingly, might have been built for such a lake. I wanted to dismiss it as folklore, but the idea lingered. Standing at the edge of the excavation the next morning, I imagined the desert transformed, water glimmering where now there was only heat. I pictured the boat sliding across its surface, the unknown helmsman gripping that asymmetrical paddle, steering toward a shore no longer here. On my final day at the site, the team began preparing the boat for transport to a conservation lab. It would be stabilized, studied, perhaps displayed in a museum one day. But here, in this strange hollow of land, it seemed more alive than it ever could under glass. As the sun climbed high and the shadows vanished, I took one last look. The wind picked up then, and for a moment the air shimmered in the distance. It was a trick of the heat, I knew, but I thought I saw the faint gleam of rippling water, just beyond the far ridge, and I wondered had the people who built this boat seen the same shimmer, and believed it was worth chasing. The Mask with Tears of Salt. It begins in a cave no one marked on any map, a place you would never notice unless you were looking for something else entirely. Shelter from a sudden storm perhaps, or the cool shadow of stone on a blinding day. From the outside the cave is narrow, little more than a dark mouth in the side of a pale wind-smoothed cliff. The surrounding earth is dry, almost brittle to the touch, the air so parched that the wind lifts fine dust into the sky where it hangs, shimmering like pale smoke. Step closer, and the scent changes. Here in this place where rain may not fall for months at a time, the air drifting from the darkness carries a tang, a faint, unmistakable sharpness that catches on the back of the tongue. It is the smell of salt. Inside the light fades quickly. Stone walls lean inward like heavy shoulders, closing in around a narrow path that twists and dips. The first few steps echo faintly, and then the ground softens underfoot, as if centuries of fine dust have gathered here in secret. Somewhere deeper inside, water once moved, long ago, perhaps in a time before the desert claimed this land. The rock remembers that water. You can feel it in the coolness under your palms if you trail your hand along the wall. And then, after a turn so sharp it feels like stepping behind a curtain, there it is, a face carved from stone, set into the wall as if it has been waiting. It is not human-sized. It is larger, the forehead high, the eyes deep hollows, the mouth set in a shape that is neither smile nor frown, simply still, as though the stone has accepted something beyond joy or sorrow. But it is not the expression that holds you, it is what rests upon the cheeks. Two tracks, running from the hollow eyes down toward the mouth. They are crusted with something pale, something that catches the dim light and glitters faintly. Salt. It has hardened into delicate ridges, each crystal distinct if you lean close. The lines are uneven, as though they formed drop by drop, each one drying slowly in the unmoving air, leaving behind its trace. And yet, the ridges glisten. They are not dry, even after what must be centuries, millennia. The tears have not faded. They remain damp to the touch, as though the stone is still weeping. The Mask with Tears of Salt does not belong to any time you can name. It is older than the cities that first learned to write their names in clay, older than the kings whose graves were filled with gold and lapis, and all the things they could not take beyond death. It belongs instead to the long stretch of years we call the Neolithic, the time when stone was still the primary tool, and yet the seeds of something more were stirring. In the hills and deserts of what is now the southern Levant, people shaped masks from limestone. Some were as smooth and round as river stones, their faces calm, symmetrical, and deliberate. Others were rougher, their features sharper, the eyes drilled through so they could see or be seen when worn. The ones found in the caves of Nal Hemar were buried alongside other strange and beautiful objects, woven materials preserved in bitumen, shells strung like beads, skulls plastered and painted to keep the likeness of the dead close to the living. These masks may have been used in ancestor worship, in ceremonies to call upon the spirits of those who had walked before, to keep them near in the shaping of the living world. Some were meant to be hung on walls, others to be worn in dance or procession. Each one was an object of presence, a face that would never change, a gaze that would never blink. The mask in this cave is different. Its features are not like the others found in museums or in the controlled stillness of climate-controlled cases. Its surface is not merely the pale of carved limestone, but streaked with the glimmer of minerals drawn from the very walls around it. The salt here is older than the desert itself. Once this place may have been near the edge of a great inland sea, the kind that slowly retreats until all that remains is a memory left in the earth. When the waters withdrew, the salt stayed, trapped in the stone. Perhaps a thin vein runs through this very wall, close enough that the changing air pulls it out grain by grain. Perhaps there is a pocket of moisture deep within the rock, feeding a slow seep that traces the same paths over the mask's face again and again, marking its eyes as though it has been crying since it was placed here. No one knows who put it here. The cave itself is remote, far from the known Neolithic settlements where masks have been found before. It lies miles from any known water source, and the approach is difficult, climbing along narrow ledges, slipping through cracks in the rock. The mask is set into the wall at about the height of a standing person, though the floor is uneven, sloping away to darkness on one side. It could have been a shrine, hidden away for only a few to find. It could have been a warning, a boundary marker for a place not meant to be crossed, or it could have been something more private still, a final resting place for a face that once belonged to the living, transformed into stone to hold its watch forever. What is certain is that the salt never stops, even in the driest months, when the air outside cracks the earth into patterns like broken pottery, the tears remain. They do not evaporate, they do not fade. If you sit with the mask in the silence of the cave, you can almost hear the faint tick of drops forming. It is not sound so much as a sense, a slow, ancient rhythm that belongs to the stone alone. You can imagine the centuries it has counted, each one marked not by sun or moon, but by the steady shaping of two pale lines down a carved face. When archaeologists first heard of it, they approached with caution. Many had worked with Neolithic masks before, but none had seen one in such a condition. The question was immediate. Was this an authentic artifact placed here thousands of years ago, or something newer, perhaps a modern carving weathered to look old? Tests on the salt provided one answer. The crystals contained isotopes that could only have formed over hundreds, even thousands of years of gradual deposition. The mask itself, limestone shaped by tools as old as the earliest known settlements, was just as ancient. But that left the deeper question unanswered. Why here? Why in this cave, far from the sites where others had been found? Some suggested a pilgrimage route, an annual journey to leave offerings, prayers, or memories in a place where the air and stone met in this strange, enduring way. Others thought it might be connected to water in another form, not the sea, but tears themselves, salt as a symbol of grief and remembrance. A face that weeps without end would have been a powerful image for people living in a world where life and death were so closely bound. If you step away, leaving the mask in its place, the cave will swallow it again. The salt will keep forming. The air will keep its strange tang, the face will keep watching, not with eyes, but with the memory of eyes, and its slow, glittering tears will keep tracing the same ancient paths. And perhaps if you return years later, you will find it unchanged, or perhaps the lines will be deeper, the salt thicker, the expression just slightly different, not because stone moves, but because your own eyes will carry the weight of more years, and you will see in it what those who placed it here once saw. A face that endures, a face that remembers, a face that weeps for something only the stone can name. The path that curved around nothing. It begins in a place that should have been easy to forget, a wind-brushed field, low and unremarkable, where the grass sways in lazy, almost bored ripples. There are no jagged ruins here, no towers leaning against the weight of centuries, no stones tall enough to throw shadows worth noticing. Just a ring of pale flagstones, each worn into a shallow curve at the edge, laid perfectly into the earth so long ago that their join lines have blurred into seams of moss and soil. The ring is wide enough that standing in the center, you feel small, not because of height or scale, but because of the way the space seems to push back at you, as if the emptiness has weight. Nothing rises here. There is no statue, no altar, no cairn of rocks, just the circle, and the grass, and a stillness that presses softly at the edges of your mind. People call it the path that curves around nothing, a name given without ceremony, passed quietly from one person to another, until it was less a title, and more a habit. No one claims to have built it. No one can explain why the stones were set so precisely when they appear to serve no purpose, and yet they remain, locked into their arrangement, like the teeth of a gear that once turned something long vanished. Approaching it, the first thing you notice is how the air feels. It is not colder, not warmer, just cleaner somehow, as though the wind has been brushed through a sieve before reaching you, carrying the scent of sun-dried plants and something faintly mineral, almost like old rain that dried before it could fall. The stones themselves are not remarkable at first glance. Each is about the length of your arm, the surface roughened by lichen, the color caught somewhere between grey and the pale blush of limestone after a long summer. But look closer, and you see the edges, not chipped, not irregular, but carefully shaped, so that the arc of one flows into the next without break. If you choose to walk it, you find your steps naturally settling into the rhythm of the circle, not hurried, not dragging, just steady. And as you pass each stone, you notice that the land around seems to lean inward, the grass bending ever so slightly toward the ring. Whether it is the wind playing tricks or something deeper in the soil, you cannot tell, but you feel watched, not by eyes, but by the space itself. The villagers from the nearest cluster of homes, a mile to the west, where the land dips into a sheltered hollow, rarely speak of it directly. If you ask, they'll tell you it's older than memory, that their grandparents' knew it was there and walked past without questions. One old woman, hands freckled like speckled eggshell, says that her father once tried to dig beneath the stones to see how deep they went. He stopped after striking something hollow, not stone, not wood, just a void in the earth, that made his tools ring strangely. He filled the hole in without looking, and when she asked why, he only said that the sound it made was wrong. Some nights, when the moon is low and heavy, the ring catches the light in a way that makes it seem to lift slightly from the earth. You would swear that there is space beneath it, that the stones hover on the thinnest skin of shadow, and yet when you kneel to touch them, your fingers meet nothing but solid ground. The illusion breaks instantly, as though embarrassed at being caught. There are those who claim the path once marked the boundary of a place now gone, perhaps a wooden hall, whose posts have long since rotted back into the soil. But the circle is too wide for such a building, and there are no traces of post holes, no stains in the earth where timbers might have stood. Others say it was a gathering space, where people walked in ritual procession before some unseen focal point at the center. But that leads to the obvious question: if there was nothing to look at, nothing to face toward, what was the walk for? One winter, when the snow fell thin but stubborn, a group of curious students came from the city to measure it. They trudged out across the frost-hardened grass, their boots leaving shallow dents that stayed for weeks. With tape and poles they marked every segment, charted every degree of the circle's arc, and they found something they hadn't expected. The path is not aligned with the cardinal directions, nor with any known solar or lunar event. Instead it faces nothing, perfectly nothing. Its entrance, if it can be called that, points toward an unremarkable stretch of land that ends in a hedgerow. But the measurements revealed something else. The circle's diameter is an exact whole number in a unit no longer used, a measurement known only from tools found in Neolithic sites far to the south. That might have been coincidence, but the students noticed another detail. Every stone had been laid so that its grain, the faint layering in its surface, ran in the same direction, like a compass all pointing to some invisible pole. They left more puzzled than when they came. When the wind moves across the field in early spring, the grass within the ring sways differently than the grass beyond it. You can see it from a distance, a subtle lag in movement, as though the air inside is slightly heavier. The old woman says it's because the soil here is not the same as in the rest of the field, that, long ago, something was buried deep beneath, and has been feeding the earth ever since. She will not say what she thinks that something is. No records mention its creation. No carvings, no markings on the stones, no artifacts left nearby. If it was part of a larger settlement, that settlement has vanished entirely. Even the soil's memory is unclear. Tests show mixed layers, as if the ground had been disturbed and then left to settle for centuries. It is the kind of place that invites quiet speculation. You find yourself wondering not just about who built it, but why it remains. In a world where wood rots, metal rusts, and even the hardest stone wears down to sand, this ring has endured, not untouched, but unbroken. Some believe that walking it counterclockwise will bring bad luck, while clockwise will bring clarity. Others insist the opposite. A handful of travelers have claimed that walking it in total silence, without thinking of anything at all, leads to a strange disorientation, as if the world beyond the circle fades slightly, like a reflection in water when a ripple passes through. No one has stayed in the center overnight, at least not in living memory. The one who tried left before midnight, saying only that the sound of the grass kept changing, growing louder, then softer, without any wind to cause it. In the archives of a small museum in the capital, there is a faded photograph, dated to the late 1800s. It shows the ring from above, taken from the basket of a hot air balloon. In the picture, the stones gleam pale against the darker grass, and the circle looks, not empty, but full of something faint, a shadow shaped like a coil, or perhaps a spiral, only visible in that single image. The negative has been examined many times, but no one can agree whether it was a trick of light, a flaw in the film, or something that was truly there, something that no longer is. And so the path remains, not famous, not celebrated, just present. A curve of stones around a center that holds nothing at all, and yet feels like it holds everything. If you stand on one of the flagstones and close your eyes, you might feel the faintest tremor through your feet, so soft that you could mistake it for the thud of your own heartbeat. It is not constant. It comes and goes in slow, uneven waves, as though some vast and buried thing were turning in its sleep far below, or perhaps not sleeping at all. The mirror that reflected the past. The quiet room embraces you like a gentle shroud. The faint flicker of a single candle breathes life into the ancient stones surrounding you, soft shadows dancing slowly as the flame trembles with each breath of air. The scent of aged wood and lingering incense mingles in the stillness, wrapping around your senses, pulling you deeper into a place outside time. Before you rests an obsidian mirror, its surface so black and smooth it seems to drink in the light, a pool of endless night captured in stone. Your fingers reach out hesitantly, brushing the cool, flawless surface. The chill seeps gently into your skin, stirring something deep within. This is no ordinary mirror, it is a portal, a gateway into forgotten echoes and buried memories. As you gaze, the obsidian ripples softly, like water disturbed by a pebble. Shadows part and distant images begin to form, coalescing into visions both strange and familiar. You find yourself standing in a vast sun-drenched courtyard surrounded by towering pillars of weathered stone. Each column is carved with swirling symbols, strange beasts and figures frozen in eternal dance. The soft gold of late afternoon light drapes over the worn carvings, highlighting the intricate detail crafted so long ago by hands now vanished. The air is thick with the scent of dry earth and blooming jasmine, mingling with the faint smoke of cedar incense burning somewhere beyond sight. Your footsteps echo softly on the rough flagstones as you wander, tracing the worn pathways between the pillars. Time feels suspended, caught between the present moment and the deep past. In the center stands a great door of black obsidian, polished to a mirror-like sheen that reflects nothing of this world. It has no hinges, no handle, no crack or seam, no means of opening. The chill radiating from its surface is profound, a deep coldness that spreads slowly through your bones. When your hand touches it, a whisper seems to rise from the stone itself, a voice, soft and urgent, barely audible. Remember. The vision shifts, folding into itself like a turning page. Now you stand amidst a bustling ancient marketplace, alive with color, sound and the rich tapestry of life. The cries of merchants hawking spices, woven cloths dyed in vibrant hues, and gleaming metals fill the air. Children weave playfully through the crowd, their laughter light as the breeze. You smell fresh-baked bread mingling with the sharp zest of citrus and the smoky richness of roasting meats. Your fingertips brush the rough wool of a trader's cloth. Nearby, a potter's wheel spins steadily as skilled hands shape clay vessels, the rhythmic sound a heartbeat of creation. At the square's heart stands a statue, its weathered face calm and inscrutable, eyes seeming to follow your movements with quiet knowing. No weapon or tool is held, yet the statue emanates a solemn dignity, as if guardian of secrets whispered across centuries. Slowly, the scene dissolves again. You are surrounded by towering shelves in an endless stone library, dust motes drifting through shafts of muted light. Scrolls and tablets line the shelves, their fragile surfaces covered in ancient script. The scent of old parchment and incense hangs heavy. Your fingers tremble as they touch a brittle scroll. It crackles softly, as though eager to share stories long buried. Tales of stars and gods, of empires risen and fallen, of those who lived before memory itself. Soft whispers echo faintly, voices of scribes chronicling time in a tongue forgotten, carried on the breath of centuries. Time blurs, bending like a slow river beneath your gaze. You feel yourself becoming part of the stream, carried through history by the obsidian mirror's silent pull. The vision shifts once more, revealing a temple at dawn. The towering walls are bathed in gentle rose and gold light, their surfaces carved with celestial beings, animals both wild and tame. The air is thick with the scent of myrrh and frankincense, carried on chants sung by robed figures moving gracefully between columns. A priestess steps forward, her robes flowing like mist, carrying a bowl of sacred water. She sprinkles droplets onto an altar adorned with fresh flowers and polished stones. Reverence hangs in the air, a moment suspended between earth and sky. The scene fades, replaced by a starlit night. Overhead, a vast dome of sparkling stars stretches endlessly. Below, a quiet village lies nestled in a valley, wrapped in shadow and silence. The air is cool, scented with pine and damp earth. Crickets sing softly as a gentle breeze stirs the leaves, whispering ancient secrets. The obsidian mirror hums softly beneath your hands, its surface alive with the breath of forgotten worlds. It is not a mere reflection, but a living archive of human memory, a vessel holding the breath of countless lives. As you breathe slowly, calmly, the mirror's surface glows faintly, like distant stars captured in glass. The whisper returns, a voice carried on the night wind. Remember, you linger in the quiet, feeling the weight of time fold around you. The mirror holds endless stories of love and loss, of creation and destruction, of lives lived quietly or boldly beneath the eternal sky. With each breath, the visions deepen. You see fields turning golden under a harvest sun, hands gathering grain with care. The rustle of leaves in a forest of towering cedars fills your ears. You hear the laughter of children chasing fireflies at twilight, the soft murmur of prayers carried on the breeze. You sense the pulse of civilizations long vanished, their echoes still vibrating in stone and earth. The obsidian mirror invites you to walk among their ghosts, not as a stranger, but as a keeper of their stories. The smooth black surface ripples again, showing a warrior standing alone on a windswept hilltop. His armor is worn, his gaze distant. Behind him, a great battle rages, the clash of swords and cries of valor echoing faintly. Yet here he stands in stillness, a moment captured before the storm. You feel the weight of his sword, the cold metal biting against your palm. His breath is steady, determined. Though his fate is unknown, his spirit lingers in the mirror's depths, eternal. The vision shifts once more. A scholar sits beneath a sprawling fig tree, quill poised over a scroll. The sun filters through leaves, dappling the ground with shifting patterns of light and shadow. Around him, scrolls and tablets tell stories of stars, of gods and mortals intertwined in endless dance. His hand moves slowly, tracing symbols that seem to glow softly in the fading light. The air is filled with the scent of ink and parchment, mingling with the earthiness of the tree's bark. You feel the gentle breeze on your skin, hear the soft rustle of pages turning. The mirror pulses gently, like a heartbeat, carrying you deeper still. You see a great river winding through fertile plains, its waters shimmering under a midday sun. Fishermen cast their nets, children play along the banks, women gather water in clay pots. The life of a community flows in harmony with the rhythms of nature. The mirror invites you to listen, to the song of the river, the murmur of voices, the whisper of wind through reeds. You feel the warmth of the sun on your face, the cool spray of river water on your hands. The visions flow seamlessly, each one a thread woven into the tapestry of time. You wander through ancient cities, silent temples, forgotten shrines. You glimpse faces, joyful, sorrowful, serene, all immortalized within the mirror's depths. The obsidian surface holds no judgment, only memory. It offers no answers, only invitation to remember, to feel, to dream. As the night deepens, the candle's flame flickers low. The room grows stiller, quieter. You rest your hand gently on the mirror, feeling its cool embrace, its timeless presence. A final whisper rises, soft as a breath. Remember. And with that, the visions fade gently, leaving you cradled in silence and shadow, carrying the weight of countless lifetimes folded within your heart. The crown that grew heavier over time. It was not the gold that drew me to the object in the museum vault, though its gleam was undeniable. It was the way the curator carried it. Both hands, palms flat, arms slightly strained, as if holding a sleeping animal that might wake and bite. When he set it down, I could hear the exhale he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The crown rested on black velvet, its surface a matte, ancient gold, less like the polished brightness of a coin, more like sunlight caught in honey. Its rim was lined with small, uneven leaves hammered thin, and delicate wire spiraled between them, in patterns that didn't seem quite symmetrical. At first it looked unremarkable, just another ceremonial headdress from some forgotten king or chieftain. But the curator leaned in and said, very softly, "You're looking at the only object in our collection that weighs more now than it did the day it was found." The crown had been unearthed in the late summer of 1912. The site was somewhere in the hills of northern Greece, a scattering of low mounds and stone fragments that archaeologists had once thought were part of a ruined watchtower. Under one mound they found a stone-lined chamber, barely tall enough to crouch in, sealed with clay and ash. Inside, there had been nothing but the crown and a thin layer of dry earth. No bones, no offerings, no inscriptions. The excavation team had weighed it, 3.4 kilograms. It was heavy, yes, but not impossibly so. They packed it carefully, sent it to Athens for cataloguing, and locked it in storage. It might have stayed there for decades, had someone not decided to display it in the 1950s. By then something was different. When the conservators took it out, they noticed the case was straining slightly at the hinges, as though the object inside had pressed against its confinement. They weighed it again, 3.6 kilograms. Not a large change, but enough to raise eyebrows. Metal doesn't grow heavier unless something is added to it. or unless its very structure changes. Theories bloomed and withered in the years that followed. Some thought dust and corrosion might have built up inside its seams. Others wondered if moisture from the air had somehow become trapped. But the vault where it was kept was dry and tightly sealed. Every cleaning revealed nothing unusual. No hidden cavities, no new layers of gold, no encrusted soil. Yet every decade, the weight increased. By the time I saw it, the record said it weighed just over 4.2 kilograms, a difference you could feel immediately when you tried to lift it. I was offered the chance, and when I wrapped my fingers around its cool, faintly gritty surface, the weight was disproportionate. Not in the sense of heaviness you expect from metal, but in a way that seemed to reach through your arms into your chest, making you feel anchored, as if the crown wasn't just pressing into your palms, it was pressing into you. The curator, an older man with sharp cheekbones and eyes, the color of wet stone, told me what few visitors heard, that in old field notes from the 1912 dig, there was a brief mention, almost an afterthought, of the sound of footsteps in the earth above the crown's chamber. The workers had thought it was just one of their own moving about, but the man they suspected of walking overhead had been in the trench beside them the entire time, and there was something else. On the day the crown was moved from the site, the youngest member of the team, a student from Thessaloniki, had refused to touch it. He said that when he bent close to examine the leaves of gold, he thought he saw movement, not a trick of light, but the slight lowering of the crown's arc, as though the invisible head it rested on had bowed in his direction. He'd walked away and never returned to the dig. Over the years, a quiet superstition grew among the staff. They avoided being alone with it. If a crown symbolizes authority, they said, this one remembers every head it has crowned, and the weight of their deeds does not fade. Instead, it settles deeper into the gold, compacting, condensing, until the metal holds not just mass, but memory. I asked the curator if anyone had tried to melt it, or test its composition in a lab. His answer was simple. Twice, he said. The first time, the furnace failed without explanation. The second time, the researcher collapsed before he even reached the smelting room. His heart simply stopped. We no longer try. That night, long after I left the museum, I couldn't stop thinking about it. How something could gain weight without growing larger. How the gold seemed dull until the moment your eyes lingered, and then it shone, not brightly, but deeply, like the gleam from water at the bottom of a well. I wondered if each gram added to it marked another year it remained in our world, another burden it carried from a past we couldn't see, and I found myself imagining the last person who had worn it. Not in triumph, not at a coronation, but perhaps in a quiet lamplit chamber with no witnesses. Perhaps they had placed it on their own head, felt its weight settle into their skull, and known they would never take it off again. Perhaps the heaviness was not the gold at all, but what it was holding in place, something that does not wish to be put down. Now, in the quietest hours of the museum, they say you can hear a faint sound from the vault, a creak, a shift, like the slow settling of something that has not yet finished growing heavy. And once a night guard swore he saw the crown tilt slightly in its case, as if acknowledging his presence. He has since refused to walk that hall. As for me, I sometimes wonder if one day the crown will weigh too much for human hands to lift, and if, when that day comes, it will finally be ready for the head it has been waiting for all along. The tree that bloomed from stone. The air was still and soft, almost reverent, as I stepped quietly into the temple courtyard. It was early morning, the sun just beginning to cast its golden light across the weathered stones, igniting the courtyard with a gentle warmth that seemed to melt centuries of silence. Around me, the ancient walls stretched high, carved with faded symbols and looping patterns that whispered stories I could only imagine. In the center of this serene space stood something utterly impossible, a tree, but not just any tree. This was a trunk fossilized through untold ages, its bark as cold and unyielding as stone, yet from its branches blossomed vibrant flowers, delicate and alive, glowing faintly in the morning light. The blossoms moved softly with the faintest breeze, their petals a kaleidoscope of colors, pale pinks, soft whites, and shimmering purples that flickered like distant stars. I paused before it, breath catching in my throat. How could something so firmly rooted in death be so vividly alive? The petrified trunk, rough and mineralized, held the weight of millennia, but life had claimed it again, blooming as if time itself had folded and reversed. My fingers hovered just above the bark, hesitant to touch, afraid to shatter the magic of the moment. The stone beneath my skin was cool, almost pulsing faintly, as if it still held a secret heartbeat. The blossoms, so fresh and tender, released a scent unlike any I'd known, a delicate mingling of spring rain, crushed herbs, and something ancient and sacred, like the very breath of the earth itself. Around me, the temple breathed with history. The walls told silent tales, ancient myths of creation, transformation, and rebirth etched into their surfaces in twisting, flowing glyphs. One carved relief depicted a tree, much like this one, rising from rock to bloom in eternal life, its roots reaching deep beneath the soil, its branches touching the heavens. Was this a vision, a prophecy, or a memory? The air grew softer still, the breeze carrying a gentle rustle, as if the tree whispered to the sky, sharing secrets only it could understand. I knelt beside the fossilized trunk, tracing the cracks and veins that told of ages past, of earth swallowed and reborn. Around my fingers, tiny blossoms quivered and glowed, pulsing faintly with a light that was neither of fire nor sun, but something deeper. In this stillness, I felt time stretch and fold, moments swelling into endless reverie. The temple courtyard became a sanctuary suspended between worlds, the ancient and the living, the stone and the flower, death and life entwined in silent celebration. The blossoms released a soft dust of pollen that glittered in the morning light, falling like tiny stars across the worn stones. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply, letting the scent carry me away from the ordinary world, into the sacred heart of this place. As the sun climbed higher, shadows shifted and danced. The blossom's light deepened, glowing brighter in the warm air. Each petal seemed to tell a story, a tale of resilience, mystery, and the miracle of life emerging from what should have been eternal stillness. I imagined the fossilized tree in a time before memory, a mighty giant that once stood tall in vast primeval forests, sheltering creatures now lost to history. How many seasons had it weathered? How many storms? And now, reborn in stone, it bloomed again, a living testament to time's endless cycle. The courtyard was silent but alive, filled with the hum of unseen energy. Somewhere a distant bird called, its voice clear and sweet, threading through the cool air like a melody from a forgotten age. The temple walls seemed to breathe with it, their ancient carvings shimmering faintly as if waking from a long dream. I felt a deep peace settle over me, a connection to this place and its mysteries. The stone tree was a symbol, a bridge between worlds, its blossoms promising hope and renewal beyond all reason. The day grew warmer, the sun's light bathing the courtyard in a golden haze. The petals glistened like jewels, delicate and perfect, while the fossilized trunk remained steady and eternal beneath. Together they whispered the timeless story of life's triumph over stillness and decay. I rose slowly, my heart full of wonder. The tree that bloomed from stone had shared its secret. Life is eternal, even in the quietest places, even where it seems impossible. As I walked away, the blossoms swayed gently, their soft glow fading into the afternoon light, waiting to bloom again when night fell and the temple's magic returned. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the temple courtyard shifted into a realm between light and shadow. The golden hues softened into amber, bathing the ancient stones in a warm, forgiving glow. The fossilized trunk stood steadfast in the center, the living blossoms seeming to pulse with renewed life in the coolness of evening. Their colors deepened, pinks turning richer, purples more mysterious, whites glowing like tiny moons suspended on delicate branches. I returned once more to the base of the tree, drawn by a force I could neither name nor resist. The air was cooler now, filled with the subtle fragrance of those ethereal blossoms, weaving their ancient scent around me like a gentle caress. The quiet hum that had lingered all day seemed to grow stronger, a vibration felt more than heard, as if the very stones beneath my feet held a heartbeat. I knelt carefully, my hands resting lightly against the petrified bark, feeling its roughness transform beneath my touch into something almost soft, like the memory of life passed into stone and returned anew. For a long moment, time seemed to pause entirely, the world shrinking until all that remained was the tree and the silent communion we shared. The blossoms shimmered faintly, each petal catching the dying light and fracturing it into tiny prisms that danced like spirits set free. A soft breeze stirred, though I could see no wind, and the petals swayed in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as if the tree itself breathed, alive in a way no fossil should be. It struck me then, in the quiet that felt sacred, that this tree was not simply a miracle of nature or a forgotten myth carved in stone. It was a message, a testament written not in words, but in the language of endurance, transformation, and hope. Life, even when seemingly lost to the ages, could awaken again in forms beyond understanding. The cycle of existence was not bound by decay or silence, but ever renewing, ever growing, ever blooming. I thought of the countless souls who had walked this temple before me, their footsteps now whispers in the stone. What had they believed? What had they hoped when they first laid eyes on this impossible tree? Had they too sensed the secret it carried, that beneath the cold exterior of loss, a vibrant life waits to bloom? The stars began to appear overhead, twinkling softly through the open sky, their light mingling with the glowing petals. The temple walls, etched with ancient stories, seemed to shimmer in response, as though the entire place was waking from a long slumber, breathing again in the quiet night. With reverence, I stood and stepped back, allowing the tree its solitude. I knew this moment would stay with me forever, the memory of stone and blossom, of life blossoming from what should have been forever silent. As I walked away, the courtyard faded into twilight, the last petals glowing faintly as the temple settled into peaceful darkness, and somewhere deep within that living fossil, the ancient tree continued to bloom, a timeless beacon of resilience and wonder. The drum that called the storm. In a remote corner of the world, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, there lies a village that seems untouched by time. Here, the air carries the faint scent of damp earth and wildflowers, and the sky stretches endlessly, sometimes calm, sometimes threatening. It is in this village, long forgotten by most, that the story of the stone drum begins, a vessel not carved by human hands alone, but by something far older, something that hums with the raw power of the elements. The drum is unlike any other. It is not crafted from wood or animal hide, nor does it bear the vibrant colors of painted ritual instruments. Instead, it is hollowed from a single immense stone, smooth, cool to the touch, and carved with symbols that no scholar has fully deciphered. Its shape is simple, almost primitive, yet within its contours lies an energy that calls forth the very breath of the skies. Locals say the drum is sacred. They say it was left by the gods, or perhaps by the earth itself, and that when struck by the right hand, it summons thunder from the heavens. The sound it produces is not a simple echo or hollow boom, but a deep, vibrating call that reverberates through the mountains and fields, shaking the ground beneath one's feet. No one knows how old the drum truly is. Some say it dates back thousands of years, far beyond the written histories of the village or even the surrounding region. Others believe it is eternal, an artifact of the storm itself, born from lightning and rain, stone and sky. But the drum's power is more than legend. The village elders, custodians of its mystery, remember nights when the skies darkened, heavy with rain, and the wind howled through the trees. In these moments, a single strike on the stone drum would answer the storm's call. The heavens would open, thunder would crash, and rain would pour down like blessings from the sky. To understand this drum is to listen closely to the stories woven by those who have felt its power. It is to walk slowly through the village, where every stone path and every weathered door holds a memory of the storm and the drum's song. There was the old man who first taught me about the drum. His skin was like cracked leather, his eyes a clear blue that seemed to reflect the sky itself. He spoke softly but with certainty, telling me that the drum was more than a musical instrument. It was a bridge between the earth and the sky, a channel for nature's voice. He showed me how to approach the drum with reverence, to place a hand lightly on its surface, to feel the subtle vibrations, the heartbeat beneath the stone. Then with a wooden mallet carved from the heart of an ancient oak, to strike the drum once, not too hard, not too soft, just enough to awaken the storm. The sound that emerged was like nothing I had ever heard, a deep, resonant growl that rolled through the air, echoing off the hills, rising higher and higher, until it seemed the very clouds were speaking back. It was a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up, that stirred something primal within, and then the skies would answer, thunder would crash, the wind would rise, and the first drops of rain would begin to fall, as if the drum had called them forth. But the drum's magic was not only in summoning storms, it was also a keeper of memory, a storyteller carved in stone. The symbols etched into its surface told tales of past tempests, of rains that saved the crops, of lightning that split ancient trees, and of the endless dance between earth and sky. I traced my fingers over the worn carvings, feeling the passage of time beneath my touch. Each symbol was a whisper from the past, a message encoded in the language of storms. Scholars might see only lines and shapes, but here in the village, those who listened knew they were reading the voice of nature itself. One evening, as dusk settled and the first stars began to appear, I sat beside the drum with the village elders. They shared with me the ritual of the storm call, a ceremony held when the rains were late and the crops thirsted for water. The ritual began with silence, a stillness that filled the air like a held breath. Then, one by one, the villagers gathered, bringing offerings of grain and flowers, placing them carefully at the drum's base. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the earth itself awaited the drum's voice. When the moment came, the eldest among them stepped forward. With steady hands, she raised the mallet and struck the drum. The sound rolled out like thunder itself, deep and commanding, reaching up to the clouds. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the wind began to stir, leaves rustled, and distant rumbles of thunder echoed across the hills. The clouds gathered, heavy with promise, and the rain finally began to fall, soaking the parched earth. I watched the faces around me, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and awe. The drum had spoken, and the storm had answered. But the drum was not merely a tool of weather control, it was a symbol of connection, of harmony between humanity and nature. In its presence, the villagers found respect for the forces that shape their world, a reminder that life depends on the delicate balance of earth, wind, and water. The story of the stone drum also carries warnings. There are those who tried to misuse its power, striking the drum out of anger or greed, hoping to summon storms to destroy crops or drive enemies away. But the drum responds only to the call of reverence. When struck with ill intent, its voice falls silent, and the skies remain still. I was told of one such night, long ago, when a stranger came to the village, seeking to harness the drum's power for his own. He struck the stone fiercely, demanding thunder and lightning, but the drum gave no sound. Instead, the skies stayed clear, and the stranger's plans faltered. The villagers knew then that the drum chose its moments, and only those who respected the storm's spirit could awaken its voice. As seasons passed, I learned more about the drum's place in the world. It was a relic of a time when people lived in close communion with nature, when the rhythms of the earth and sky were understood and honored. The drum's presence reminds us that even in a world of machines and technology, there remain mysteries that defy explanation. The sound it produces is not merely acoustic, but elemental, a call that resonates with the very forces that shape weather and life. On calm days, the drum sits quietly, cool and unassuming. Yet beneath its surface, the energy pulses, waiting for the right moment, the right hand, the right heart to summon the storm once more. The drum has become more than an object. It is a legend, a living piece of history that echoes the ancient bond between humans and the elements. It asks us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our souls, to the timeless conversation between earth and sky. And so the stone drum remains, waiting in its village, a guardian of storms, a keeper of secrets, and a reminder that some calls are answered only by those who truly hear. The gates that cast no shadow. Far beyond the relentless hum of modern life, in a quiet corner of the world, where the air feels thick with stillness, where the earth seems to breathe softly beneath a vast sky, stands a gate unlike any other. It rises alone on a ridge, a monument carved from ancient stone, worn by time but untouched by shadow. The stone itself carries the weight of centuries, its surface weathered smooth in some places, deeply carved and sharp in others, telling a story written in patterns, symbols, and whispers. Locals call it the Shadowless Gate, not because it is a tale told around fires, but because of a simple, undeniable fact: no shadow ever falls from the gate's frame. No matter the sun's journey across the sky, whether it blazes high at noon or sinks low at twilight, whether the moon's silver light drapes the land or stars scatter like diamonds overhead, the gate remains bathed in an unyielding light. It casts no shadow. The very idea seems to bend the rules of nature and perception. It is this mystery that has drawn many curious travelers, scientists, historians, and dreamers, seeking to touch the intangible. Some arrive with cameras and instruments, hoping to capture proof, to measure angles and light. Others come quietly, carrying stories passed down through generations, hoping to feel the pulse of an ancient secret. Yet all who come depart changed, marked by wonder, by the unanswered question lingering in the light. I first heard of the Shadowless Gate from an old man seated by a crackling fire in a village miles from the ridge. His eyes shone with a calm reverence, his voice a soft echo of the wind as he spoke of dawns spent watching the sun rise over the ridge. He described how the shadows around the gate stretched long and cool in the morning light, yet the gate itself shimmered faintly, glowing softly as if touched by an unseen flame. The stone was untouched by the darkness that crept over the land. That image stayed with me. A gate bathed in light, but untouched by shadow. It was an invitation, a call to explore a place where the laws of nature appeared to bend and twist. I set out to find it, following winding trails that cut through rugged hills, crossing quiet valleys where the world seemed forgotten. The air grew cooler and more fragrant with wild herbs as I walked, the birdsong weaving through the stillness like a soft lullaby. The sky stretched endlessly, deep blue with scattered clouds, as if the heavens themselves leaned close to watch. When I finally reached the ridge, the sun was lifting slowly above the horizon, painting the earth in soft gold and delicate pinks. The gate rose before me, magnificent and solemn, carved from stone that seemed both eternal and fragile. Swirling patterns covered its pillars and arches, celestial symbols, animals entwined in endless dance, spirals that spoke of cycles beyond time. I moved slowly around it, feeling the rough stone beneath my fingertips, noticing how the light played across its surface, how every curve and groove seemed alive. I watched the shadows carefully. They stretched across the grass and the rocks around the gate, touching everything except the gate itself. No darkness crossed the threshold of the stone frame. It was as though the gate belonged to a different realm, bathed in a light, untouched by night or day. I lingered there as the sun climbed higher, tracing its arc across the sky. Shadows shifted, lengthened, and contracted all around me, but never on the gate. As evening fell and the world softened under twilight's glow, the gate remained bright, untouched by the deepening shadows. When the moon rose high, spilling silver across the ridge, the gate's surface caught the lunar light and seemed to pulse faintly with an inner glow, still casting no shadow. The carvings told their silent stories, stars that wheeled across invisible skies, animals frozen in mid-leap, cycles of birth and death etched deep into stone. They seemed like messages from the ancients, a language of symbols whispered through the ages. I imagined the hands that carved them, the people who lived with the rhythms of earth and sky, who understood mysteries now lost to us. Locals offered their own stories. Some believed the gate was a portal, a boundary between worlds, where light was eternal and shadows dared not follow. Others spoke of protective charms woven into the stone by ancient guardians, designed to hold back darkness, both physical and spiritual. Whispers spoke of spirits who wandered the ridge by night, crossing through the gate's arch on journeys beyond human sight. Scientists arrived too, bringing their tools and theories. They analyzed the minerals of the stone, measured angles, recorded sunlight patterns. Some suggested the stone might contain a rare mineral that reflected light unusually. Others believed the gate's shape and carving created optical illusions, deceiving the eye and confusing shadows. Still, no single explanation captured the full mystery. The gate defied neat answers. I returned many times, through the cycles of seasons. In spring, the ridge burst with wild flowers, their colors vibrant against the gate's steady stone. The sun warmed the earth, and bees hummed softly around the carvings. In summer the grasses grew tall and golden, the heat rippling through the air, yet the gate remained cool, unshadowed. Autumn brought a quiet grace, leaves turning amber and crimson, falling in slow spirals. In winter, frost covered the ridge in delicate crystals, sparkling like tiny stars, but the gate stood steady, the frost only highlighting its unchanging glow. At night, under a sky heavy with stars, the gate transformed. Its carvings shimmered faintly, as if lit by some hidden source. A gentle breeze stirred the tall grasses, carrying the scent of earth and distant rain. The silence was profound, a silence that felt alive, filled with echoes of the past and promises of the unknown. One evening, I sat beneath the gate's arch, feeling the cold stone beneath my hands breathing in the crisp air. I listened to the rhythm of the earth, the whisper of wind, the distant call of an owl, the faint rustle of leaves. It was a moment suspended between worlds, where time seemed to fold in on itself, and the gate stood as a silent sentinel to secrets older than memory. What could it mean, I wondered, for a gate to cast no shadow? Perhaps it was a reminder that light and darkness are not always opposites, but parts of a complex dance. That in some places, under certain skies, the rules shift and change. That mystery itself is a doorway, inviting us not to fear the unknown but to embrace it. The gate endures still, a monument to the unexplainable, a beacon for those who seek wonder. It calls quietly to those who stand in its light, urging them to dream, to question, and to remember that some mysteries are eternal. As the days and years pass, the shadowless gate watches silently over the ridge, a threshold between the known and the unknowable, forever bathed in light, forever free from shadow. The writing that rewrote itself, far beyond the clamor and haste of modern life, nestled deep within an ancient forest, untouched by time and the footsteps of many, there lies a hidden clearing known only to a few. This is a place where the air feels thick with stillness, where every breath is a slow inhalation of something older, quieter, and more profound than the noise of the world beyond the trees. The forest here spreads wide and dense, its towering trees standing like silent sentinels, their gnarled roots weaving beneath layers of moss and leaf litter, tangled in a dance that has played out for centuries. You have journeyed here on a quiet morning, just as the first pale light of dawn stretches through the canopy. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth, pine needles, and wild herbs, carrying the faint chorus of distant birds waking to greet the day. Each step you take is cushioned by a soft carpet of moss, and your footsteps are swallowed by the thick silence around you, as if the forest itself holds its breath in anticipation. After weaving through ancient trunks and ferns that sway gently with the breeze, the dense foliage parts abruptly, revealing a sun-dappled clearing unlike anything you have ever seen. There, at the center, rests a stone altar, massive and imposing yet elegant in its simplicity. It is carved from a single block of granite, rough-hewn but smoothed by centuries of wind, rain, and the touch of countless hands. The altar's surface is etched with inscriptions, symbols that curve and flow with a strange hypnotic rhythm, a language that seems to hover just beyond comprehension. The locals whisper about this place in hushed tones, calling it the altar of changing words. They speak of it as if it possesses a will of its own, a living entity forged in stone. It is said that the writing here rewrites itself, altering its lines and curves between visits, shifting the story it tells in subtle but undeniable ways. No scholar has been able to unlock its secrets, no linguist has yet cracked its code. The altar's script is an enigma, alive and ever-changing, as if the stone itself breathes and dreams. You approach the altar slowly, your fingers brushing over the cold stone, feeling the roughness beneath your skin and the faint vibrations that seem to pulse from its heart. The inscriptions swirl beneath your gaze, neither words nor pictures, but something in between, a delicate dance of symbols looping and curling in a language of the ages. You take out paper and charcoal, gently pressing the sheet against the altar's face, tracing the shapes with reverent care, hoping to capture a fragment of the altar's story before it shifts again. Hours pass as you sit in quiet contemplation. The sun climbs higher, filtering through the branches and scattering light over the altar's carved surface. All around, the forest hums softly with life, the chirping of cicadas, the flutter of wings, the rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, but your attention remains fixed on the living language before you. When you return to camp and examine your rubbing, your heart quickens. The lines you traced seem to move before your eyes. Curves deepen, dots vanish, and connections between symbols twist and reform. You realize that this altar's story is not a static monument, but a flowing river, endlessly shifting, rewriting, reimagining itself in the quiet solitude of the forest. You decide to return the next day, then the next, drawn irresistibly to the mystery. Each visit reveals new changes in the script, new nuances in its silent message. The altar beckons you deeper into a world where time folds and meaning dances just out of reach. With every return, you feel the forest closing around you, the whispers growing louder, the shadows stretching longer, as if the very earth holds its secrets close, willing only the most patient to uncover them. The altar of changing words is more than stone and inscription. It is a living story, a place where history and mystery entwine, where the past and future pulse together in a timeless dance. And as the sun sinks low and twilight draws its veil over the clearing, you sit beside the altar, watching the symbols shimmer faintly in the fading light, alive, breathing, and forever rewriting themselves. With each new dawn, you find yourself drawn once more to the heart of the forest, to the clearing where the altar waits, timeless and alive. The air feels different here, charged with a subtle energy that hums beneath the stillness. The forest around you seems to lean closer, as if listening, watching, guarding the secrets carved in stone. Today, the light filters softly through the canopy, casting a gentle glow that dances on the altar's surface. You step forward reverently, feeling the weight of the moment pressing gently upon your chest. Your fingers trace the grooves of the inscription again, but this time you sense something more, an almost imperceptible warmth beneath the granite, a pulse like a heartbeat echoing through the stone. As you watch, the shapes begin to shift, subtle at first, a line that curves a little more sharply, a symbol that blinks like a living eye. You realize that the altar is not merely changing its message, it is communicating, responding to your presence, inviting you into a dialogue written in shadows and light. You spread your tools carefully, charcoal, paper, and camera, determined to capture every nuance. The The carvings seem to flow like liquid ink beneath your gaze, forming new patterns that hint at stories of ancient rites, celestial movements, and forgotten wisdom. You wonder who carved these symbols, what knowledge they held, and how this language came to transcend the boundaries of time and stone. The forest around you grows quieter, the usual chorus of birdsong hushed as if in reverence or anticipation. A cool breeze stirs the leaves, carrying with it a faint scent of resin and earth, an ancient perfume that speaks of endurance and change. You breathe deeply, allowing the forest's calm to seep into your bones, anchoring you in this place where time bends. As you work, a shadow flickers at the edge of the clearing, a shape indistinct but familiar, like a memory glimpsed through mist. Your heart quickens. Is it a spirit of the forest, a guardian of the altar, or perhaps a trick of the light, conjured by your own eager mind? You look closely, but the shadow fades into the trees, leaving only the sound of rustling leaves and the steady pulse of your own breath. Night approaches slowly, painting the sky with shades of purple and deepening blue. You hesitate to leave, reluctant to break the spell of this place. As darkness falls, the altar takes on a new life. The carvings glow faintly under the moon's silver light, their shapes shimmering as if lit from within by some hidden fire. You sit beside the stone, feeling the cool night air settle around you. Stars wheel overhead in endless spirals, mirroring the swirling patterns etched into the altar's face. The boundary between earth and sky feels thin here, and you sense the presence of something vast and timeless, a story written not just in stone, but in the very fabric of the universe. Sleep finds you gently, the mystery of the altar weaving itself into your dreams. You see hands carving symbols in the dark, hear voices speaking in a language made of wind and shadow. You glimpse scenes of ancient ceremonies, the dance of stars and the quiet wisdom of the forest. The altar's message unfolds in your mind like a secret melody, elusive but beautiful. When dawn breaks again, you rise with a renewed sense of purpose. The altar waits, ever changing, a living text that invites you to read between the lines, to listen with more than your ears. It teaches patience, humility, and the art of surrendering to the unknown. You know your journey has only just begun. The forest will hold its secrets for as long as the stones stand, and you will return again and again, drawn by the eternal rhythm of the writing that rewrites itself. As the days stretch into weeks, your visits to the altar become a rhythm, a sacred ritual woven into your life. Each time you arrive, the forest greets you like an old friend, its quiet strength, a balm against the noisy world you left behind. The altar too feels less like a distant mystery and more like a living presence, a silent teacher that speaks in symbols and light. With every rubbing and every photograph, the inscriptions continue their subtle dance of transformation. Lines shift and rearrange themselves, as if the stone is alive with memory, retelling ancient stories and revealing new secrets just for you. The language, though indecipherable in words, resonates deep within your mind, like a melody half remembered from childhood or a dream dissolving at dawn. Sometimes, when you sit quietly by the altar, you swear you can hear faint whispers carried on the wind. Not voices as we know them, but a language older than sound itself, a song of the earth, the trees, the sky. You close your eyes and let the murmurs wash over you, feeling a connection to something vast and eternal. The forest shifts with the seasons around you, each bringing new layers of meaning to your journey. Spring's fresh green tendrils wrap the clearing in hope and renewal. Summer's golden light floods the stone with warmth and vitality. Autumn's fiery leaves carpet the ground like whispered stories fallen from the trees, and winter's frost glistens like frozen time itself. A quiet pause in the endless dance. One night, under a sky thick with stars, you sit beneath the altar's carved symbols and feel a profound stillness settle over you. The air is cool and heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The inscriptions glow faintly in the moonlight, each line shimmering with a soft inner fire, as if the stone itself breathes and dreams alongside you. In that moment, you understand this altar is more than a monument. It is a mirror held up to the soul of the world, reflecting the ever-changing flow of time, memory, and meaning. The writing that rewrites itself is a reminder that nothing is fixed, nothing truly ends. Life moves in cycles, in patterns of creation and transformation, endlessly weaving new stories from the old. You realize the altar's mystery is not a puzzle to solve, but a presence to be felt, a sacred space where the boundaries between past and present blur, where language becomes poetry, and where the silent heartbeat of the earth can be heard if only you listen. As you rise to leave, the first hints of dawn break over the horizon, painting the sky with soft strokes of pink and gold. You take one last look at the altar, now glowing with the first light of day, its carvings shifting once more in their eternal dance. You feel gratitude swell within you, for the gift of this place, for the chance to witness a story still being told, for the quiet power of mystery itself. Walking back through the forest, your steps light and your heart full, you carry the altar's secret with you, a story without end, a language always rewriting itself, and a reminder that some wonders exist beyond words, waiting patiently for those who seek them with open eyes and open hearts. And in that knowing, you find peace. Some mysteries are solved, but these still whisper their secrets to anyone who dares to look closer. This is Unearthed Secrets, where the past is never truly silent. Subscribe, like, and share, and tell us where you're watching from.